All right, so we're going to try to graph a couple of these simple quadratics. Remember I told you that I'm going to take that standard form and we're going to break it into pieces. Okay, so you can understand what the A and the B and the C, they play different roles when we're talking about graphing our parabolas. So for example 1, we're going to start simple where your parabola is just 2x squared. Now remember, the standard form of your equation, I'm going to write this down real quick, looks just like that. So if you look at your standard form compared to what I wrote here, for example 1, I just gave you the first term. So this is what your graph is going to look like if you're just given the first term. All right? Now, in order to graph a parabola, we're going to need an XY table. I'm going to ask you to have the same values of x as I do. If you use the same values of x as I do, then our tables will be the same, our points will be the same, and then I should be able to match up. If you make a mistake somewhere, I can tell you why. So the first thing that you want to do is set up your XY table. So you want to draw this beside your graph there on your notes. And because I have that axis of symmetry, where if I fold it, I get the same thing, I got to make sure I have x to be 0, x as positives, and x as negatives. So I need to cover all three types of numbers. So here's x to be 0. I'm going to let x be positive, and then I'm going to let x be negative. And hopefully you'll see something here in a minute to show that when you look at these values, it's not as bad as you think in order to get the points. Now, I need to complete the y table. The way that you complete the y table is you plug and chug. You let x be 0. When you put in x to be 0, whatever you get for y, you put right here. Then you do it again for 1, 2, and so on. So here's what it looks like. When x is 0, that means I have y is equal to 2 times 0 squared. Well, you know anything times 0 is 0, so there's your first point. It's going to be at the origin. Let's keep going. When x is positive 1, and this is where you guys are going to have to know how to handle your squares. 1 squared is 1 times 2, my y equals 2. And if you're like, Ms. Udoka, where did you get that? Just evaluate. 1 squared is 1, 2 times 1 is 2, period. Now do it again when x is equal to 2. I don't know if you guys can see that very well, so let me clean up a little bit. All right, when y has x as 2, watch what happens. 2 squared, hopefully you know, is 4. If 2 squared is 4, you multiply that by 2, my y is 8. So now I have 3 of my points. Now, watch what happens. You've got to remember that whenever you have a negative number that is squared, it still gives you a positive number. Remember, a negative times a negative is always a positive. So if I want to say negative 1 times negative 1, that's just 1. 1 times 2 will give me 2. Do you notice a 2 somewhere else? I hope you do. Let's do the same thing for our last value of x. When x is negative 2, if I plug that into my equation, negative 2 squared is the same as saying, and we're just talking about this piece, negative 2 times negative 2. Well, that's equal to positive 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Now, if you noticed that these two numbers are the same, my same y and the same thing here, that's not a coincidence. There's that symmetry happening, okay? So when you have that line of symmetry and it cuts your parabola in half, that means you're going to have the points in the same place on the left and the right-hand side. The left and the right-hand side are indicated by your negative and positive numbers. So take a minute. I want you to go ahead and graph this. Plot your points, and let's see if you can draw or graph your first parabola. I'm going to do the same thing. You've already got your nice, pretty graph paper there. First point is at the origin. Then we've got 1, 2. Then we've got 2, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you need to pause the video, go ahead. You should know how to graph points on a line. I'm not going to slow down for that. So when you have negative 1 and 2, you're at the same place. You see, you're at the same place, but on opposite sides. And when you have -2, you're also at +8. There's your points. Now, you're not done until you connect the points. Just like that. Add your arrows to prove that it's continuous. Boom. There is your parabola, the first one you've ever drawn probably. This line here in the center is your axis of symmetry. And guess where your vertex is? Right here. So, set up your XY table. We're always going to use these X values unless I change it up a little bit. But follow my X values. Do the plug and chugs to get your Y's. Plot your points. Connect your dots to make your curves. Every graph that you do in this unit should look like this. No straight lines. All right, next video.